So you don't act out the evil, but you integrate its strength. And the Talmud really mirrors this by saying we need to love God with both our inclinations. Levavercha.
And I just want to chime in that we're comparing Jung with rabbinical thought, but they have kind of divergent purposes, and we need to just make everyone aware of that. The end point of Jung's goal here is psychological health, which is great. I mean, we need that. I mean, that is the driving force behind what God wants to do in our lives. You know, a purely psychological process without the involvement of God or without the understanding that God is your king. Love God with all your heart. Love God with all your heart. We're scratching out the love God part. We're doing with all your heart. But the rabbinical idea brings back in the love God part of it. And within that, the end point is dedicating your total self to God, to the divine. And in a way, it's a way of making yourself disappear. It's a way of yourself making the living, breathing, walking Messiah that Yeshua was embodying.
I do nothing of my own, but everything that the Father tells me. He became a channel. He became an unhindered vessel to allow the mind of God to flow within physicality. And we see that this interesting vision I'm seeing, that when he's walking on water, when he's healing people, when he's turning water into wine, this is where he's able to break down the what do we call it? The version of reality that is split against itself into an individuate state, you know, this breaking down those quantized boundaries of our reality. And this is where we see what looks like supernatural happening. And I think this is a very important statement I want to say, that this isn't magic. This is getting out of the way so the mind of God can fully paint the picture through your life. And the fully painted picture does have power over the elements, does have power over death even, that quantized boundary that death is, and enters us into a resurrected reality, which is a completely different paradigm that I don't think we will ever really understand until we are in it.
Yeah, just as a painting, or even in terms of audio, with MP3 files. Very briefly, I had a lecture with my work to do with digital audio, and we were using an MP3 file alongside an uncompressed file, and he had some very high fidelity speakers, and he was saying that when you listen to MP3 files, you are making up, your brain is putting together a lot of things. And he said, what are you noticing when I play this uncompressed file and this MP3 file? And the theory is that you are going to be more tired listening to the MP3 file because your brain is putting things together. To truly listen in high fidelity, and actually really to go to listen to an orchestra, is an experience that happens to us on multiple more levels than we experience listening to our Spotify playlist in the car. There's something more going on. It's an unquantized version, an uncompressed version of reality that can actually do something to us on a deeply psychological level. And it's just a little aside there, but I think it really, really kind of speaks into what we're talking about here.
Wow, that's really fascinating. I want to do that experiment myself, but I just have a cheap, nasty little Bluetooth speaker in my kitchen. That's the only device I listen to on.
Well, I've just got rid of some really nice speakers, and I actually regret it because I'm the same. I've just got a little Bose speaker. It sounds good, but I'm missing out on left and right separation there. There's so much in it. This would take us off.
Very interesting. Maybe we need to do a little... I want you to put something together and have a little conversation about that. That's really fascinating. So very briefly, I think we need to finish, but we can't finish without going into this process that Jung came up with, which I think it's very, very useful. It underpins your IFS thoughts. And I think it's just practical, very practical to try and do something about this that we're talking about here. Jung didn't believe that we could just simply think your way into this, the integration of that shadow. Because thinking is another layer, as we talked about with the runaway car audio. Thinking is a layer above the deepest layer, the causal reality, as we called it. It's emerged from the soup of the unconscious. And the unconscious doesn't speak in language. We were saying that thinking then concretizes itself into language. But imagine going below or beyond below. Speaking below thinking, because thinking comes from consciousness. Going below even consciousness to learn the language that is being spoken there, because the language is floating around there somehow. But it's not coming from the thinking that the conscious mind is doing. It's coming from a deeper thinking, an unconscious thinking. And it speaks in not logic, not intellect, but it speaks in images. It speaks in emotions. Pay attention to emotions. This is the language of a deeper place within you. And symbols. We see famously symbols in dreams. And this is part of the process. So to bridge the gap between the conscious ego, and I just want to very, very quickly, briefly say, I think we've mentioned it before, but we have the 3 stages, the id, which is that when we're born and there's these kind of primal drives. Funnily enough, I think we've interpreted that to be this doctrine of original sin, that we are born sinful. That is I would say, damaging policeman. It's too binary. It's too simplistic. It's not useful. It's not helpful to the process that we're talking about here.
It's interesting because a doctrine it's very difficult to go over the boundaries of doctrine. But maybe we have quantized something that wasn't meant to be quantized in that way. Maybe we're employing an MP3 in our doctrine sometimes, and it's tiring and it's not achieving its deepest purpose. And I suppose that speaks into the challenge of breaking down our doctrinal borders, if you know what I mean, in order to be useful, in order to further the flow of God's mind into reality and actually become a true individual. We don't want to block processes happening, and doctrine so often does that. Dangerous though, because doctrine was put there for a purpose, and we need to remember that always and tread carefully when we are exploring the doctrinal boundaries that we've lived with for many years. Judaism never had the idea of original sin. They always had this idea, which I've learnt, I think, is a more mature way of seeing the same picture. It's the same picture. I think original sin came out of a lot of fear, a lot of superstition around the time, but I'm not going to go into that now. We'll maybe do another conversation on that, but just want to say that.
Yeah, we've got to be very careful here. So yes, where was I?
Apologies, I just wanted to chime in with that.
No, that's fine. I've thankfully got notes in front of me. So the goal of this process here that we're going to outline is bringing that darkness to the surface so you can negotiate with it. And the first stage is catch your projections.
That's it. I think it's really important for me to chime in with the Bible, New Testament verse there. It's just find it. 2 Corinthians 10 verse 5. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We take captive every thought to make it obedient to Messiah. I think within that, yes, in our capturing, we're going to go into it. Actually, failures have started.
I mean, you haven't given me a chance to talk yet.
Yeah, I just want to put this as a backdrop before you talk. The truth is, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. We're saying that these are very real, we want to bring them into the room without a policeman. We want to talk to them. But there is a knowledge of God and there's an obedience to Messiah. That's obedient, I hate that word because Shema is here. Just hear it. Shema, often interpreted and translated as obey. It is hear and do. It's get it, like listen, hear it, oh, I get it. Oh, this is good wisdom, and kind of leads into what I was saying yesterday, that to fear God is to rate him, and to shema again. You shema because you rate the wisdom. So yeah, we're bringing these shadows in. We're capturing those thoughts, but within the context of 2 Corinthians 10, verse 5, with the truths I've mentioned there.
Yeah, very important to stress that we're going somewhere with this process. And I think Jung understands that too. And it's an interesting, so this first step, catch your projections. And there's a statement here. The outside world is a mirror for your unconscious. So we rarely see our own shadow directly. Sometimes we need a mirror to look in to really see ourselves. And if you've got a repressed trait like arrogance, laziness, maybe in the lust area as well, jealousy, you're going to likely feel, this is his theory, and I kind of find it quite useful within the capturing of the thought process to use this as a net sometimes. Obviously you can have thoughts when you're walking along and you realise that's a thought that you need to capture and talk to. But you doing therapy, I'm sure you analyse situations and you say, well, what was that feeling? Where do you feel it? What's the part that you're talking to at this time? But this is another way of putting out the net and catching some more stuff. So you're walking along, you meet up with someone, and you feel this intense, almost irrational irritation with them. When you see this trait in that really annoys you. And the practice of step 1 is to notice when you've got a disproportionate anger reaction, judgmental reaction towards someone that causes that reaction. And ask yourself, what is it about them that is enraging me at the moment? And then you have to ask yourself the question, where does that exact trait live inside of me? How do I act this out? This same behavior in my life. It might look different in your life. It might present differently. But when you pull the projection back, you reclaim a piece of your shadow.
What do you mean by pull the projection back? Sorry, I just need to clarify that.
Well, literally, in terms of a movie projector. So you see all the people around you. You are a blank canvas, and you take a repressed part of yourself, as it were, a film reel of the traits that you refuse to acknowledge you have, and you beam it onto someone else.
Oh, that's the process of projection you're talking about. Okay. Ooh, wow.
It's a survival tactic, I think. So pulling the projection back, or withdrawing from the withdrawing from that projection, it means taking your eyes off the screen. And it's a technique, a mind technique that Jung employs here, is that really to come to terms with that jarring realization that the thing you are pointing at is actually coming from inside of you. And here's what it looks like in practice. Maybe it's easier to put this into practice here. Imagine you got someone in a group who's fiercely ambitious, like talks really loud in meetings, promotes their own work. This kind of person you say inside yourself is, they're so arrogant, they're so selfish. So stop there, capture that thought. Your blood's boiling. You have a visceral dislike of this person. If this is a projection, you've got a massive clue here as to your own shadow in that scenario, in that moment of life you have come to there. And there's 2 paths that you can take at this moment. You can actually realize that the shadow that you are uncovering at this moment is actually that you are exactly like them, but you're unwilling to admit it. You're deeply ambitious. You're in a bad way, the way you're interpreting it. You're self-promoting, You hate them because they are displaying your own secret sins out in the open. That's one interpretation of what's going on in that moment. The second one is, I think this is the more interesting one, is that you're repressing that trait within you, and you actually need that trait. This is something you were taught as a child to not do, to be quiet, to brag. And you've lost your own ambition, your own voice in the prison, in your basement. And you hate your coworker because actually, maybe they've given themselves permission to do something that actually has been forbidden for you to do. And so in that moment, pulling back the projection actually says, why does this trigger me so deeply? What does this person represent that I am running away from? In any of those two ways, or even more maybe, if you can, in that moment, see another way. So instead of projecting outwards and trying to fix that person or complain about them, it's kind of like turn it around to a little bit of self-talk, saying, I'm not actually mad at them. I am angry at them because I'm terrified of my own ambition. And this is just an idea. I am projecting a repressed desire for recognition onto that person. Now that begins a very powerful process within you. And why is this going to reclaim a part of your shadow? Because, well, number one, the emotional charge of this thing has been diffused. The irrationality of that hatred you felt for the other person, they just go back to being just a regular, annoying human.
Yeah, they're not a monster anymore, are they? It's not like projecting on a screen your inner drama like a movie would be.
It's back in perspective, in its sane size. And you get your energy back at that moment. I mean, it takes an immense amount of psychological energy to repress. But when you stop fighting and admit, yeah, okay, and okay encapsulates everything we just talked about in that moment, in that scenario, this kind of bound up energy is freed within you. And remember, it's energy. Remember, now we can harness that thing.
Which then leads us on to the integration.
Yes, but not yet. We've got some more processes to go through here.
Okay, yeah. But ultimately, yeah, that's maybe in that moment you can integrate.
There's no hard and fast rules to this, yeah, obviously. If you have the energy at that moment, time, space, thinking, capacity in that moment, yeah, maybe you can. But let's go into point 2 here. Analysing your dreams. Meeting the shadow in its native habitat. And I think that's a lovely way of putting it. As we said before, I think when we sleep, the conscious ego powers down. And the deeper place within you, the unconscious, comes out to play, to be honest. So the practice here is to keep a dream journal. Write down your dreams. And you're going to be looking for recurring figures, maybe the people you're running from in the dream. Maybe the things that are difficult to even share. Write it down. The stuff that you would keep locked, you would not like put onto a television screen. You would wake up and repent. You would get on your knees straight away. And again, eventually, in a healthy way, we are going to repent. So you need to recognize what comes up in your dreams as personified fragments of your own psyche, trying to get your attention. And I think this is where it's controversial, but actually very front end at the moment, using psychedelics, LSD, magic mushrooms, very front end at the moment. And you see these people go into these kind of waking dream states where they really process parts of themselves that you would do in dreams. And yeah, it's when you're awake, it's very challenging. People come back from those experiences actually experiencing hell sometimes, really. What you would describe in the worst case scenario of hell. But they come back and they process and they integrate. We're talking about the same kind of pattern here. So yes, I'd say Jungian. Step number 2 is dreams, but also I would push the boat out a little bit and say maybe, and I'm not advocating for this at all, but maybe there is some interesting frontier to explore in a clinical environment using psychedelic treatment. And I would say, thankfully, because we need to move on with this a bit, especially in terms of healing trauma, PTSD, addiction. That's what Ebola, what is it called?
Ibogaine. Ebola. Definitely
yes.
Not Ebola.
So employing that, I've heard that it really has a massive success rate in healing addiction to alcohol. Addictions generally, that lots of people who are addicted to opioids, fentanyl, codeine-based products. They're finding a massive breakthrough. So there we go. That's just an aside. But it also tells me that this kind of dream state is a very powerful place to do your work within. It's another net.
So we're not at integration yet. That's great. Maybe these are just different nets. But there's a process to it. I suppose we're going through step 1, 2, 3. What's the third step then?
Active imagination. I think that kind of crosses the boundary between the dream state and the maybe psychedelically induced state. Active imagination, having direct dialogue with the unconscious. And yes, maybe you can say that that's what psychedelics are very useful for. But Jung's not talking about that. He's talking about this technique of, and he wrote this down in the Red Book. I've got the Red Book. It's a bit of a journey, to be honest, to go through it. It's massive. I can't say I've read it all, but had a dip into it. And he talks about this, where you purposely initiate a conversation with your inner figures. So you sit in a quiet space, you close your eyes, and you bring up one of the shadow figures. Maybe it's a recent dream, maybe even a visualization of jealousy or anger or something visceral within you at the time. And when that image is clear in your mind's eye, you talk to it, you have a conversation with it, you have a dialogue with it, and you write that dialogue down in the journal. You ask questions like, who are you? What do you want to teach me? What do you want?
To be honest, it reminds me of when you're talking to the part, especially a burdened exile. Yeah, in IFS, yeah.
Exactly. It's you're negotiating a treaty, as it were, thinking in terms of the kingdom between your waking ego, the consciousness that is usually the prison, and your hidden drives. You're letting this shadow self out of its prison and having a frank conversation. You know, that's the thinking about it. The backdrop to our judicial system should be restorative justice. And we don't do this very well, do we? Even in our own psychology, we don't do it well, let alone in our culture. And then you can get, now we've point 4, the conscious integration. You give the beast a job.
I mean, that's right out of IFS. You give it a new job.
Yes, because remember, it's an ox. It's got energy. It's useful energy that if you tap into, you can plough a field in no time compared to you with a digging implement take you all day to do. So if your active imagination moment reveals this shadow that might be aggressive or troubling to you, without the policeman there, remember, you don't suppress it, you integrate it. And say it's a combative, like a kind of a violent side of you, you maybe integrate it by taking up martial arts.
I'm thinking in terms of the lust one. Reminds me of, again, 1 Corinthians. Just looking up here, 1 Corinthians 7, verse 9. But if they cannot control themselves,
they should marry.
They should marry, for it is better to marry than to burn with passion.
Yeah, that's a very practical way of putting a saddle on the beast. Within the bounds of marriage, a covenantal marriage, it's a place of fruitfulness and is meant to go into having children. That's the ultimate.
Easier said than done, though. That's me being not married.
Yes, I do get that. So, yeah, maybe in terms of thinking about the drive of lust, ultimately it's creative, isn't it? It creates new life. So maybe that's where the energy needs to go into creativity.
Absolutely, and I've talked about that before with one of the conversations we've had. Creativity is a great outlet for that, yeah. Just got to realise the power within that, and interesting.
There's always an outlet. There's always a saddle that will fit the ox. There's always a plough that you can attach to that energy for good, for the sake of loving God with your whole heart. But we just have to finish with I think we need to finish here, but Jung had a warning. Shadow work isn't easy. It's harrowing. Because it's going to destroy an image you have that is, frankly, idealized. And it requires the ability to admit that within you resides the evil that you often despise. Remember, we're talking about the projection idea. Those things that you truly despise, you may find within yourself. And as I spoke about the projection being a sort of protection mechanism, it implies when you realize these things are in you, a certain amount of protection is taken away from you. Survival. It's almost a dangerous place for you to be in without the proper environment to contain that. And you need to be able to have friends who are there for you. You need to be able to find solace in your relationship with the God who you're doing this for. And I think that's the difference between the psychological goal of Jung and the spiritual, relational goal with the rabbinic thought under God as your purpose, God as your ultimate reason for doing this, is that he's got you. He's carrying you through this process, and it actually increases your relationship with him and almost has a knock-on effect, like a bonus or even a byproduct of a relationship that grows stronger. And as you become more the image and likeness that he wants you to become, as the king who is now taking control of your life, come in with his kingdom, and you are the vassal underneath that new authority, you grow a relationship. And there's many ways I can see that acting out, to be honest.
Well, I'm just seeing a picture of, this is why a dog becomes a man's best friend. This is why a horse becomes a man's best friend. We don't understand horses anymore. We have cars, but the relationship becomes very strong. The love grows, the currency flows between you. The current flows and the currency.
Yes, you get your value, you get your energy from the source. Really, that's the deepest desire within us, if you want to be honest about it. That's meaning, that's purpose. So I think we need to stop there. That was a deep dive into love, wasn't it?
Yeah, we've gone a long way, haven't we? Thank you for the conversation there. It's really enlightened me, and hope it helps whoever may be listening to this.